Las Islas Marshall, ubicadas en el noreste de Australia, sirvieron como laboratorio para que el ejército norteamericano hiciera las pruebas con armas nucleares de mayor potencia en la historia.
El resultado, un paraíso contaminado que después de más de 5 décadas sigue sufriendo los efectos de una bomba 1000 veces más potente que la que destruyó Hiroshima en 1946.
Su nombre, Bravo. Un experimento secreto para probar los efectos de la radiación en humanos que, gracias a este filme, se ventila por primera vez.
El docu ganador al premio del público, Nuclear Savage, de Jonas Horowitz, recoge esta historia, otra tragedia del poder.
Over 60 years ago, an American Air Force bomber followed this exact route to begin a series of atmospheric nuclear tests conceived with all of the hubris of the American empire. The biggest bomb that exploded was in 1954, the Bravo test, and the explosion was 1,000 times bigger than the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima.
In the Marshall Islands, a program called Project 4.1 was established by the Department of Energy to use Marshallese people as virtual guinea pigs in these nuclear studies. Recently, with the release of documents heretofore secret or classified, lead us to believe that Marshallese population, different groups at different times, were used for radiation experiments. There were projects and programs conducted by various agencies of the United States which involved exposing people and studying them.
The official story by the American government is that the fallout on the islanders was an accident.
But the crime of Bravo, and I do not use that term lightly, is that the United States government knew in advance of the shot that the winds were headed in the wrong direction. The explanation about the unpredicted wind shift is a lie. The weather briefing indicated winds at 20,000 feet, quote, were headed for Rongelap to the east. In other words, the United States detonated the Bravo shot with full knowledge that it would be contaminating lands and people entrusted to its care by the United Nations.
There's a feeling deep in my heart, stabbing at me.
The real proof of intent to contaminate the people came a couple of years later because they purposely moved the islanders onto a contaminated island. And they knew that the island was severely contaminated. They had tested all of the coconuts and all of the food growing there, and they knew that everything that grew there was radioactive.
If one were to take the total yield of the nuclear weapons tested in the Marshall Islands and spread them out over time, we would have the equivalent of 1.6 Hiroshima shots every day for 12 years.
The U.S. detonated 67 atmospheric nuclear bomb tests in the Marshall Islands, yet the size and environmental effects of most of these explosions remain secret to this day. The islanders have been saying for decades that they were human experiments, but they couldn't prove it.
In less than a minute, you will see the most powerful explosion ever witnessed by human eyes.
The title, Nuclear Savage, comes from some government newsreels that the Americans did in the 1950s. When the people were contaminated from the bomb testing, they were brought to the United States for tests. And the narrator says, oh, these are savages.
To the AEC Argonne Labs in Chicago last week came 7 men, natives of the Marshall Islands. These are fishing people, savages by our standards. The Marshallese caught by fallout got 175 roentgens of radiation. Most humans are exposed to less than 20 roentgens in a lifetime. So, a cross-section, a delegation was brought to Chicago for testing. The first was John, the mayor of Rongelap Atoll. John, as we said, is a savage, but a happy, amenable savage. His grandfather ran almost naked on his coral atoll. John reads, knows about God, and is a pretty good mayor.
The reason I think the United States used these people for human experiments is because of racism.
Many observers of the first bikini bomb tests thought that Hiroshima and Nagasaki provided more than enough evidence of the effects of the bomb, and that the bikini tests were intended more as a Cold War demonstration to the Russians and the rest of the world that the U.S. had more of these atom bombs at their disposal.
3, 2, 1, 0.
The first time I went to the Marshall Islands was 25 years ago. I went there to make a documentary film about the American missile base at Kwajalein. After I finished that film, I was expecting some kind of justice or some kind of direct result of the film to help the people in their fight with the U.S. government. And it didn't really have an effect that I could see, and I was frustrated, so I became an activist and I joined Greenpeace. I got a call from the Islanders in 2005. They said, are you still making films? And I said, yes. Why? And they said, well, we need another one.
The nuclear weapons tested here by the U.S. government would contaminate these islands and alter the lives of the people beyond their wildest dreams and their worst nightmares.
Oh, sweet and lovely, lady be good.
After decades of American weapons testing and military occupation, the traditional life of the Marshall Islanders has largely disappeared. Thousands of islanders now live in squalid conditions on a tiny island called Imcine, 2 miles north of the American missile base. With an estimated 16,000 islanders crowded onto just 65 acres of land, Imcine is a slum and has become known as the ghetto of the Pacific.
I wonder if they will tell you about Project 4.1, the study of humans exposed to radiation, drawn in 1953 for the planned 1954 Castle Nuclear Test Series, Project 4.1.
I think that they don't care because the major media is so controlled by military industrial corporations that it's not covered and it's not talked about. Their accountability is to the corporations, not to justice.
It's a big building. What is inside?
I don't know. Justice.
Justice? That's good.
Such behavior was punishable as war crimes for Nazis who had done that during World War II or before. Such behavior in the case of the Marshalls was no different.
In the end, I did bring in the Nuremberg trials. I compared the situation in the Marshall Islands to the Nazis because, in fact, at the Nuremberg trials, they held a trial just for doctors and scientists who experimented on concentration camp prisoners.
Military Tribunal 1 has found and adjudged you guilty of war crimes, crimes against humanity. Military Tribunal 1 sentences you to death by hanging, and may God have mercy upon your soul.
The Americans came up with something called the Nuremberg Code, which was a new international set of ethics and laws that said you cannot experiment on humans, that this is a war crime and a crime against humanity. It's important to point it out.
You think it's evil? Can you use that word?
What? I mean, I don't know. You know, English is a second language. There are many words that I think might be better, but for lack of one, evil is probably as close as you can get.
If we can cut
Yeah.
some of the material you gave us yesterday.
To put in your program?
Yeah.
Yes.
It says only for private.
Yes, you can use it. These days, everything gets copied and put on the internet, and it goes everywhere, and you lose all control over it. So that's why I put that notice. It's ironic that it takes the Mexicans to present this film in the United States. There's something darkly funny about that. Here's a American film by a U.S. citizen about an American story, and the only way to show it in New York is if the Mexicans present it.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
We have liftoff. Liftoff in MSLS IFT-1A target launch system on a mission.
Nuclear Savage será proyectada en el Lincoln Center de Nueva York gracias a Cinema Planeta.
Y para los que no vieron Nuclear Savage en Cuernavaca, la podrán ver en el DF en el Cine Lido, el sábado 5 de mayo a las 8 de la noche.
Te va a volar los sesos.